Hello, bruv. Instead of finishing the other 10 or so books that I've started, I will start another one. This one's How to Grow Handsome by Jacques. It's got a longer title than that. How to Grow Handsome, or Hints Toward Physical Perfection and the Philosophy of Human Beauty, showing how to acquire and retain bodily symmetry, health, and vigor, secure long life, and avoid the infirmities and deformities of age, by D.H. Jacques. This is a new edition from Fowler and Wells of New York, 1885. Originally published in 1870. To the beautiful daughters of his native land, the wives and maidens of America, whom he would gladly teach how to become more beautiful still, this book is dedicated with the most profound respect by their devoted friend and admirer, the author. There's the contents, as you can see, 240 pages. Preface to the new edition. In presenting this edition to the public, it is fully appreciated by the publishers and editor that many volumes of physiological literature intended for popular reading are in the market, and that they are multiplying rapidly in response to an increasing demand. But so far as a demand exists for books of any class, they will be supplied, if there be writers to prepare them, and if the treatises on physiology are acceptable to the public, they but whet the appetite for more. As a man's mind expands and becomes cultivated, there is felt the need of further and better mental food. The books which at first appeared to be sufficient and to answer all his inquiries become insufficient, and he looks around for fresh and higher teachers, capable of responding to his numerous and advanced questions. Most of the volumes intended for public use found upon the booksellers' counter relating to the subject which is specially considered in this treatise deal with physiology in a rudimentary or fragmentary way. Proceeding from sources of authority, they are compilations of precepts with but little reasoning or philosophy. Their sphere is therefore necessarily limited, for when a man becomes enlightened by facts touching upon a science and has experienced some benefit from them, he is usually led to look into the theory or principles which they supplement. He seeks in logic the confirmation of his belief. This desire incites an investigation, which may be protracted to extremes, with all the possibilities of that kind of growth which opens up fields hitherto unthought of. The author of Hints Toward Physical Perfection devoted a large part of his life to observations and study in human physiology and dietetics, and as a writer for the public was far in advance of the average medicist. He aimed to instruct the masses to reduce scientific formulas to plain terms, so that all might understand, believing that whatever related to health, the public at large had a right to know, for the reason that everyone has a right to improve and develop himself in mind and body to the furthest possible extent. He heeded little of that sophistry which would have people believe that learning is the privilege of the few, that the masses are not entitled to know all, even about their very selves. Indeed, at the time when Dr. Jacques first introduced himself to the public as a writer on hygiene and physiology, it was the current opinion among the laity that the man who had no professional standing yet wished to know something concerning his organization of the relation which part bears to part, even if the wish were based upon the very laudable desire to know enough about medicine to treat himself when ailing, was influenced by a morbid curiosity which it was not fitting to indulge or to encourage. Nevertheless, the young physician might indulge his caprice in the way of investigation. In almost every line and escape criticism merely on the score of its being his business. As years passed on and men and women of earnest philanthropy and liberal culture insisted upon doing some substantial work for mankind and made anatomy, physiology, and hygiene their subjects, employing the pen and the press where they might, the berries of exclusiveness one by one have yielded, and the masses of the people have been brought to look more and more into these matters of fundamental importance. It is 15 years or more since Mr. Jacques published the first edition, but notwithstanding the prestige of his name as an author in physiology, it proved at that time of a character so much in advance of popular knowledge and sentiment that it found but a limited circulation. Today, the situation is greatly changed through the efforts of authors like Thrall, Shue, Richardson, Hoofland, and Verdi, and the able and brave enunciations of Alcott, the Reverend Joseph Cook, Mrs. Kirby, and others. Comprehensive in its dietetic range, it nevertheless furnishes sufficient information for the need of general society with respect to the organization of the body. Its details of advice affect more the diet and habits of him or her who would acquire a better personal state. All who are parents would have vigorous and beautiful children, and to such the book is particularly commended, and for their use it will be found especially serviceable. It is not a medical work strictly. It is not written for the purpose of ministering to diseased bodies, of prescribing modes of cure. Its sphere is rather to suggest ways of living, based upon the results of physiological research, which shall tend to the prevention of sickness and to the invigoration of the system. Dr. Jacques looks at beginnings, although highly appreciative of the possibility of amelioration for those who have inherited constitutional tendencies to disease. He supplies that information which every person is anxious to know concerning the right food to eat, the way in which to take exercise, how to work, how to use mind and body, indeed to secure the best possible results. A man of constitutional weakness from childhood, he nevertheless exemplified in his own life the effects of an enlightened philosophy and lived much beyond his expected term of existence, accomplishing in its course far more of, or far more of practical good than 99 out of 100 of his fellows who inherited at birth strong and vigorous bodies and were capable of realizing in their life the delights of health. As was intimated in the beginning, intelligent people in society have advanced so far in their reading of physiology and hygiene that they demand the association of reason with the precepts of the health reformer. They would know why some persons are weak and broken down by disease at the age when they should be exulting in vigor and power of endurance, and why others suddenly halt in the midst of a career which was marked by the apparent possession of robust health and, after a brief struggle, die. The truth which is testified in the Bible of Christianity, that the sins of the fathers are visited upon the children, and that the tree is known by its fruits, is taking hold of the consciousness of men. And while they instinctively approve its justice, they yearn to know the reason of its being and the methods of its operation in human life. There is certainly an appalling positiveness in the doctrine of heredity, which, when fairly understood, must compel men who have been living heedlessly to pause and fearfully to consider the whence and whither of their being, and to trace the line of their duty in their domestic relations. Once awakened to a sense of their physical responsibility to the world, men see around them 1,000 striking examples of broken moral and social law, of perverted minds and impaired bodies, and no longer wonder that so many are sick and unsound. Indeed, as they advance in their knowledge of hygiene and the human organism, they find themselves wondering that the condition of man is not much worse, that more are not broken in health, and few are able to carry the burdens of life and do the work of the weak and impotence as well as their own proper share of duty. The wonderful recuperative quality of the human body also astonishes and delights these observers, evidencing as it does a most merciful provision of nature in behalf of man. Although one may be broken in health through inattention to her ordinances, if he endeavor then solicitously to observe them, he will usually find nature kind and forgiving, and in time experience a renewal of his strength. Nature cares for her obedient children, and affords them certain proofs of her favor, even when suffering constitutional ailments, the cruel heritage of parental ignorance or folly. But it is not fitting to anticipate the reasoning in this line of our author, which is more definite than our mere illusions can be, and supported by abundant data. Health is the proper condition of every human being. Disease an abnormal condition. It is the province of this volume to show why health should be the possession of every man, and why there are so few among us who can stand up and say, "I am well." In his introduction, Dr. Jacques has sketched the general outline of the work with much particularity, believing with Sir William Temple that health is the soul that animates all enjoyments of life, which fade and are tasteless, if not dead, without it. And knowing by experience that a man starves at the best and the greatest tables, makes faces at the noblest and most delicate wines, is poor and wretched in the midst of the greatest treasures, and fortunes with common diseases. He traces that course which the wisdom of physiology and hygiene prescribes for the maintenance of that most desirable blessing, health, and for the avoidance of or recovery from those common diseases. For the reason that has been given, this book does not meet the cordial welcome from the public, which its author expected would be the reward of the labor he had bestowed upon it. And the few editions sold, it was permitted to drop out of print. Now, however, when the minds of the intelligent are directed to the important prior questions of life and health, its restoration is appropriate, and it is believed that its liberal, unpartisan tone, the soundness of its philosophy, and the practical directness of its suggestions, to say nothing of the purity of its style and the delicacy of its language, will secure a wide and attentive reading. In the confidence of its value as an evangel of health, the publishers do not hesitate to commend these hints to all who desire a better condition of their bodies and a better balance of their mental faculties. That corpus sanum allied to that mens sana, which is the substantial basis of harmony and beauty in human nature. Editor, Phrenological Journal, New York, April 1st, 1879. I'm going to read the preface too, just because I have time, and going into and I do not have time to go into the introduction because it will probably send me past 30 minutes. I'm trying to keep these to 20 or 30, and I don't want to go over. Preface. This volume deals with subjects of vital importance to every man, woman, and child, and has been written in a spirit of thoughtful earnestness and with a strong desire to make it a useful auxiliary in the great work of human physical improvement. These considerations will, we trust, ensure for it such a degree of attention, at least as will enable the public to judge for itself with what measure of success our labors have been crowned. We have aimed not so much to unfold new principles or present novel facts as to popularize those which scientific investigation had already established, and show, in some cases at least, more fully and clearly than had hitherto been done, their practical application. Our plan has rendered it necessary for us to touch upon some topics usually ignored in popular works on physiology and hygiene, and to introduce in illustration outlines of the nude human figure. But as there is nothing we believe either in the topics themselves and our treatment of them, or in our illustrative drawings, at which even prudery itself can reasonably take offense, we deem no apology necessary. Our readers will hardly be found among those who are ashamed of their bodies or unwilling to be instructed with reference to their organs and functions. We address ourselves to all classes and to both sexes, but especially to woman, as she is the greatest sufferer from the evils at the removal of which we aim, and her condition has the most important bearing upon the welfare of future generations. To her we appeal not only for her own sake, but for the sake of posterity, to give her powerful aid to the cause of physical regeneration, which is, at the same time, the cause of mental, moral, and social elevation, and to lead man with her up the ascending slopes which lead to the temple of health and beauty. If we shall succeed, even in the humblest degree, in awakening her interests, enlisting her sympathies, and impressing her with the sense of her dangers and her duties, we shall not have labored in vain. New York, March 21st, 1859. And that will be it for the time being. There's only 6 more pages, but I don't think I can get through them. I guess I can. Should I, though? Let's do it. I guess I'll do it. Introduction. Perhaps the proposition implied in our title that physical or bodily perfection lies within the range of human possibilities, at least, although by no means a startling one, may call for a few introductory remarks in its support. Were a similar statement, however, to be made with reference to oxen and cows instead of men and women, nothing of the kind would be required. The reason is obvious. We have hitherto devoted our attention mainly to the improvement of the various species of animals and vegetables which have proved useful or agreeable to us, to the almost total neglect of our own nobler race. Experience has taught us that the former are completely under our control, that we can so order their propagation and development as to modify their shapes, sizes, colors, and other qualities at will. If we have not yet placed them absolutely beyond the reach of improvement, they are at least so nearly perfect that the additional steps required seem not only possible, but easy. We have remodeled the horse, for instance, 100 times to suit our convenience and pleasure, and to adapt him to the various uses for which he is required. For our heavy work at the plow and in the dray, we have added thickness to his bones and muscles, strength to his limbs, and stoutness to his whole frame. For the carriage and the saddle, we have imparted grace, symmetry, and a more delicately molded form. And for the sports of the turf, we have given lightness, length of limb, and a hound-like slenderness. In the same way, we have multiplied varieties of the dog, the sheep, the barnyard fowl, and the pigeons, changing not merely the forms and colors, but also, to a considerable extent, the natural instincts of the animals, on which we have exerted our transforming power. The changes wrought in the products of the vegetable kingdom are, if possible, even more wonderful. The noble Newtown pippin and the princely bellflower are descended from the small, hard, and acid crabapple of Europe, from which single stock we have now many thousands of varieties, sweet and sour, early and late, and of almost every possible size, shape, color, and flavor. The delicious pear was originally an austere and innutritious fruit, cultivation having developed all those desirable qualities which now give it so high a place on our tables. And the juicy and nutritious peach is said to have been once merely a bitter and poisonous almond. Every pomologist knows that by the use of the means which science and the arts have placed within his reach, he can, as a general rule, just as easily and merely and surely have good fruit of the various sorts, cultivated as that of an inferior quality. By transplanting, grafting, adaptation of soil and manure, and the proper method of cultivation, he secures the desired results. Having wrested from nature the secrets of her generative and life Directing forces, he assumes for his own pleasure or profit the entire control over most complicated processes, like Guy the Wise, for whom the zephyr in the garden rolled from plum trees vegetable gold. He seems so wonderful are the results of his manipulations to work on his maker's own receipt and make each soil and element steward of stipend and of rent. What the hell that means? These facts would seem incredible were we less familiar with them, but as it is, we look upon them as matters of course and no more astonishing than the daily rising and setting of the sun, or the regular succession of the seasons. When, however, one speaks of the physical improvement of the human race in any other than the most general terms, he seems to a majority of minds to have left the sphere of practical realities and to be indulging in fanciful speculations. Having tried our skill upon horses and dogs and upon apples and peaches, we can speak with confidence of our power over them. It seems no great exploit to give a pear the desired flavor, to stripe a tulip to our liking, or to impart the hue we fancy to a rose, but to mold the manly or the womanly form into symmetry and grace, to tint the cheeks and lips with nature's own colors, or to give to the hair or beard the silky softness and wavy undulations or spiral twinings which the highest beauty demands, is deemed too far beyond the reach of human science and skill to be seriously supposed. The general principle that man, as an organized being, is subject to the same laws that govern all other organized beings, must, however, be admitted by all, and everyone who has taken the trouble to inform himself upon the subject knows that upon the nature of the germ from which he has sprung, the quality and quantity of the nutriment received, and the character of the external influences and culture brought to bear upon him, depends the physical character of the human being as well as of the horse or the dog. These truths have been announced and reiterated, especially during the last quarter of a century, by the leaders of human progress in the departments of physiology and phrenology, by Combe, Caldwell, Cabanis, Broussais, Delage, the Fowlers, and others, but they have not yet become a part of the living faith of the world. Only here and there an individual constantly acts upon them, as upon other self-evident or demonstrated truths. Examples, however, illustrating the improvability of man are not wanting. History and observation both furnish them. The ancient Greeks demonstrated the power of direct physical culture and the influence of the fine arts and an aesthetic worship in developing a high order of personal beauty and vigor. And the modern Turks and Persians furnish noted instances of the transformations effected by crossings with a superior race and the selection for many generations of mothers of great physical beauty. But there are persons, even in this last half of the 19th century, who look upon it as little less than blasphemy to talk of improving, to say nothing of perfecting man, the noblest work of God and made in his image. Was he not created perfect in the beginning? They will ask. The question is irrelevant. It is enough for us to point to the fact, too evident to be disputed, that he is very far from perfection at present, whatever may have been his original state. We may, however, safely admit his pristine perfection. The fall of man, in a physiological sense, whatever may be said of the theological dogma so termed, is no myth. Our multiplied deformities and diseases are sufficient evidence of its truth. The horse and the sheep, the peach and the plum, as they flourished under the genial skies of the primal paradise, may also have been perfect, each in its way. But if so, they shared in the fall. We have been engaged in restoring their lost virtues and beauties till, for them, earth has become at last almost the paradise regained. Can it be wrong to attempt to do the same for man? Should we not, on the contrary, find ourselves acting in cooperation with God himself? all of whose laws, whether revealed through inspired men or written in the great volumes of nature, indicate perfection as the ultimate destiny of the race. We are zealously engaged through the instrumentalities of science and religion in developing and molding the intellect and the affections, but these, in the present stage of our existence, must manifest themselves through the physical organization. And while this is defective, their action must be obstructed and their manifestations imperfect. Their action must be obstructed. It is only through a healthy and shapely body that a sound and harmoniously developed mind can operate with perfect freedom and efficiency. Hey, look, we got some sunlight going here. How nice. Too bad it's shading the book. It is also true, as we shall show in the proper place, that the natural action of the symmetrically developed mind tends to the reproduction of its own symmetry in the physical organization of which it makes use, and that therefore in bringing external influences to bear upon the latter for its improvement, we but second the efforts of the indwelling intelligence. Moving it back to the shade. We find man at present weak, diseased, and if not absolutely ugly, at least far below our idea standards of beauty, both in form and in face. Can he be restored to his primeval vigor, symmetry, and grace? And if so, how? It is certainly time for us to ask these questions and to set ourselves earnestly about the practical solution of the problems they involve, the results of our experiments upon the lower animals, and upon the products of the vegetable kingdom point out the path to be pursued. We have only to modify our processes to adapt them to a change in some of the conditions under which we must work. It may be urged here that we have not the same control over the conditions on which improvement depends as in the case of the lower and subject animals. With them, we go back to a period previous to birth and determine the circumstances under which conception and gestation shall take place. We cannot do this, it is true, except in our own persons, in dealing with the human subject, but we sway intelligent beings not less surely in another way through their intelligence. We have only to impress the facts and principles involved so clearly and deeply upon the public mind that they shall become a part of the established faith of the day, and our object is more than half accomplished. The work becomes thenceforth both an individual and a collective concern. Oh, we lost them. And is zealously pushed forward at all points. Progress in this department must be gradual, but each step in the right direction secures an obvious and permanent benefit. We recognize fully the importance of the germinal principle and of the original direction given to the vital forces in the reproduction of the human being, and have devoted due attention to the point in the succeeding chapters. But we have given special prominence to the equally momentous fact that the already existing and even matured physical organization may, under certain conditions, and by the use of the perfectly legitimate means, be modified, both in its internal conditions and in its external forms, to an almost unlimited extent. The former branch of the subject has been very fully and quite satisfactorily elucidated by other writers, and especially by O.S. Fowler in his various physiological and phrenological works, and by Alexander Walker in Intermarriage, while the latter, though the need for its thorough exposition is equally pressing, has received, in some of its bearing at least, very little attention. The human form is plastic. Until age has hardened its parts, it is but an image of soft clay, which we may mold at will, and we have explained and illustrated more clearly and fully than has hitherto been done the means and methods by which we may most effectually and salutarily act upon it. Shown here, we may impart fresh vitality to the languid frame, give strength to the weak limbs, substitute grace of motion for awkwardness, remodel the ill-formed body and homely features into symmetry and beauty, and postpone indefinitely the infirmities and deformities of age. We might quote 1,000 facts to show the importance and urgency of the work we have undertaken. We might point to the multitude of puny and deformed children, to the records of infant mortality, to the numbers who crowd our asylums for the blind, the deaf and dumb, and the insane, to the almost universal ill health which sustains such an army of physicians and renders so many hospitals and water cure resorts necessary, to the general lack of physical vigor in both sexes, and especially in women, and to the scarcity of even tolerably beautiful forms and faces. But these facts will suggest themselves and need not be set forth in detail. A popular journalist says the desire for beauty, or at least completeness and comeliness of form, is felt whenever a human heart palpitates. Am I engaging? Is the incessant but often unrealized question of the maiden's bosom, am I a commanding? The unexpressed aspirations of the boy? Beauty or strength, cascaded in a rounded, complete, and admirable physique free from excess or deficiency of proportion, stands among the highest ambitions of the woman or man. The man. A perfect form, it is the universal vanity, and how well you are looking is everywhere among the most pleasing of compliments. Well, looks like I ain't going to finish this in 33 minutes. We all want to be physically perfect because we want that our presence should awaken attention, deference, perhaps admiration, and because, born inevitably to love, we would be capable of awakening love in others. The admiration we bestow on a perfect form, when by chance we meet with one, it is a feeling that all know at some time in life. It is a feeling akin to worship, one in which the head has no part or prerogative. We reverence instinctively the largeness of grace and of the perfection of notion, life, and capability of which we perceive that our nature is susceptible. I'm going to stop here because I'm quickly running out of time, and I'm not going to be able to finish the last chapter without this stopping and resetting itself. But I guess I might as well let it go and see if it does not reset itself like it usually does at 33 minutes for whatever reason. Miss Catherine E. Beecher, in her letters to the people, says, I am not able to recall in my immense circle of friends and acquaintances all over the Union so many as 10 married ladies born in this country and in this century and in this country who are perfectly sound, healthy, and vigorous. Down to 7 seconds here. We'll see if it runs out. If it does, I will start right back here. If not, I will continue. No, it's not going to stop on me. If the simple announcement of our subject